Hey, my name's Chris. I run Hejmo projects with my wife Kate. We're a small family-run business based in the French Alps. We typically undertake large-scale renovations, the odd new build and extensions, kind of a mix of like interior design and more construction work.
How do you handle unexpected issues during projects?
Having done this for a while now, I guess the main thing is there shouldn't really be anything unexpected, as in things will come up that you didn't know were going to happen, but you should kind of expect that to happen. You know what I mean? Like out of everything I've done, I think I've had where it just, I don't think there was anything in there that changed. But the client but he was really open up front. He was like, this is my budget. I'm not sticking from it. I'm not moving from it. The base was already poured and we put a new wooden structure on the top. So it's basically a new build, but without having to do any groundworks. And I think that's about as simple as a project can ever get. Pretty much everything else we do, whether it's a new build and the client changes their mind, which is because with the best will in the world, until you see something in reality, all the drawings and the 3D models in the world aren't quite the same as standing like in the space with the view. And even if you model through Google Earth or something like the sunlight and stuff, it's never quite the same as standing there. So someone changing their mind, or if it's a renovation, lots of the farmhouses here are more than 100, 150 years old. So you just don't know what you're going to find until you take it apart. So the floor height is probably not going to be the same as you've drawn it, or a wall's going to need underpinning, or whatever it is, it's highly unlikely that you're going to end up doing exactly what you've drawn to start with. So yeah, kind of it not being unexpected is the first thing, and then after that is kind of just trying to walk people through the consequences of whatever it is, whether it's time or money or what they're going to achieve from the building, whether they've lost a room because of head height is no longer the same. And it's just trying to be as quick with communicating, as clear as communicating that as you can. And that's partly with the drawings. It's so much easier to communicate with a drawing than it is trying to explain something, because it's just referenced, it's written down in front of you. There's no language barrier. Like I speak French, so I find it easy to talk to trades, but lots of their clients are English. And if there's a bit of talking between trades, it's just much easier with a drawing, which is why we came to using Rayon, because it's so important to be able to manage a drawing pack as you're going through a build.
What are some of your favorite projects and why?
It was a project called the Stone House, which is local to where we are, which was I think the building itself was a couple of 100 years old, and it's a very tall, as the name implies, stone house. And I think the family that built it, maybe they'd run out of money at the end, but they'd never rendered the outside, so you can see all the beautiful stonework that was how the building was created. And where we is part of the Haute-Savoie region, which for quite a long time was Swiss, and then it was Italian before it was French. And you can see lots of like Italian architectural details, like there's on the window shutters where they have like a little over center latch is a really common, the molding, the casting is like a really common thing you see in Italy. And when we renovated, we found loads of documents in there from the family that owned it, and the guy he had his diploma in watchmaking from an Italian university, and there's just lots of little details you can see in there. Anyway, so it's quite an interesting project, but the main house was cool, but off to the side of it, he had a small barn that he wanted to renovate as well. The owner wanted to try and get 3 bedrooms in there as like quite an interesting like Airbnb rent. Like it clearly wouldn't work as a family home. It would work as somewhere to live, but that wasn't what the brief was. And I can't remember the size of it. It was probably only 7 meters by 3 meters footprint over 3 floors, but then it had split level in it and then a gable in the roof, and that was really tight to try and get everything to fit in. And pretty much everything we did had to have a dual purpose, as in like where the split level was, the split of that became the bench seating for the dining table. So where the split was, you could sit on that. Yeah, literally every 50 mil in the building counted, and that was, yeah, it was he had a really good aesthetic. I did more of the construction project management than the interior design, because the client had a really clear aesthetic of what he wanted, and that blended with how the building turned out in terms of layout. Yeah, it's only small, and I just really liked it. It was just a really fun project to work on, and it's just really cool when you walk in, like how everything kind of just works, and the stairs stuck under the split level, and the kitchen's levered in, and it still feels big enough to be in. And yeah, really cool little space.
Which features of Rayon made you decide to start using it for your projects?
It wasn't one feature particularly, it was the way the whole package worked. Like whenever I try out a new piece of software, whether it's like drawing software or I don't know, project management stuff, you just kind of sandbox it for a little while and just kind of play around with it. And maybe a project you're doing, you're like, right, well, I'm not going to draw the whole thing on here, but maybe I'll just put a day into starting drawing with it and just kind of get a feel for how it works. Been using AutoCAD before, and I've used really capable 3D CAD products from uni. So my background's a mechanical engineer, like pro engineer. And they're really capable, but they're too hard to use on the scale that we're using. Also, especially AutoCAD is very hard to use as a designing tool. It's a very good drafting tool, but it's a terrible design tool. What I sort of, when I was sandboxing, I came to realise fairly quickly that it's actually much easier to design in Rayon. Like you need to put, like with any program, you need to put the time in to set up and understand like the walls, for example, and how the doors fit in as openings. But once you've kind of put that legwork in and that groundwork in, which is still much less than it is understanding the basics of like a full-blown 3D package. Once you've done that, redesigning is much, much easier. It's quite intuitive. There's quite a nice mix of the, I don't know if it's AI, but the whole kind of snapping to lines that aren't immediately obvious that they're lined up, along with like the normal snap functions and the grid snap functions, and the realization that we could design in it rather than just draft in it. That I think was the main thing that we cottoned onto fairly early, and that's why we started to invest more time into using it. And then and for us it just fitted really well. It's much easier to go from model to paper than it is in some other instances. Like there's always issues around scaling and dimensioning and where you're drawing on one or the other, which is you need a bit of in-depth understanding of how it's working to make sure it comes out right. But with you, I use SketchUp sometimes for like 3D visualization, more for me for like the interior of a building, and that's terrible for trying to get anything out on 2D from that. And AutoCAD's pretty clunky for getting anything out onto a PDF. And we've found with Rayon, it's really quite easy to go from your model to something that looks professional, that you're very happy to put in front of a client fairly quickly without, it's kind of not lost time. That communication bit with the client is super important. It kind of stops you doing the stuff you actually need to do to move the project forward. So the easier that is for us, the better, to be able to quickly go from a technical view to something that the client can understand and look professional is super, super helpful.
How has Rayon improved your design process compared to the tools you've used previously?
Yeah, so in terms of like the design process, I think when like referencing it earlier, when you were talking about dealing with unexpected changes, which I was kind of saying, like they are kind of expected, you just don't know what it's going to be, is exactly that for our process. I mean, we've only worked and done this in the French Alps, so different places build differently, but from the way that we work, where you have a structural engineer is telling a mason how to execute the part of the building, and an architect is, in France, is more often than not concerned with the planning permission and the outside of the building, the number of different steps of changes in there, even if it was a new build, because the structural engineer their execution drawings will differ slightly to the architects, and having someone who can keep on top of that. And there might be quite small changes of 20 or 30 millimeters here or there, but to have a software program that you can make those changes onto fairly regularly without it like ruining your whole model, like you can drag a wall down and all the walls come down with it. You don't leave yourself like 5,000 lines that you have to go and trim afterwards. Even and especially because of what we do with renovations, where it's never quite as you thought it was going to be. It's inevitable that's going to happen. So the biggest part that helps with the design process with us is being able to manage those changes quickly. You can kind of, not any product, you can do an initial set of drawings and it's fairly easy, but they're not going to stay like that as you go through the product. So having something that's easy to change as you go along, because if it's not, everyone ends up working off an old issue of a drawing or a sketch, and that's when it horribly starts to fall apart, because the tiler's got the initial version and you haven't had time to update a new version, and everyone's working off different versions of drawings, and it's horrible. So is it the same thing, having something that's capable enough to do what you need to do but is flexible enough to be able to change it on the fly as you're going through a project is the biggest thing.